Okay, Mariana, do you want to give us a- Mariana?
Yes? Okay. All right, so We Fill in the Blank is a nonpartisan, student-run organization dedicated to engaging the youth in their community. Over the past few years, we have hosted countless debates and forums, conducted exit polling, and also participated in breaking apathy with the goal of civically engaging the youth. Our debates are known for employing what is known as the Socratic method. This method is a one-on-one dialogue between the candidate and a moderator. Each candidate will be presented with the same initial question, and from there, the moderator will walk through the candidate's thought process to allow everyone to better understand why the candidates think the way they do, with each of the candidates receiving 15 minutes for this part of the debate. While this is underway, the other candidate will be in a separate breakout room to ensure fairness for all. We would also like to remind the audience we are simply here to speak on behalf of the community, because especially through a pandemic, we recognize the importance of civic engagement and political discourse. Transitioning a debate onto the virtual format is certainly one of the most effective, albeit newest ways to reach audiences during the COVID-19 era and the 21st century. So with that in mind, we ask that you please be patient regarding any technological issues that may arise. I would like to thank each and every one of the candidates for running, as this act shows that they each have a vested interest in our community. Now, I would like to hand it over to one of our members who will introduce our first speaker, Ms. Hatch.
Okay. And prosperity to the residents of El Paso and District 29. She will personal liberties and constitutional rights. Bethany will work towards education reform and for the sanctity of life at all stages of life. Bethany will work to lower property taxes, encourage responsible spending, and allow Pasoans and residents of District 29 to keep more of their hard-earned money.
Good evening, Ms. Hatch. Thank you for participating in today's debate. For the next 15 minutes, we will have a discussion which will have to better our understanding your policies as a candidate of the Texas Senate in District 29. So we ask that you please be clear and specific so that constituents get a better understanding of yourself and your positions. So I am Angel. I will be moderating your portion of this debate. So to begin, I wanted to start with what creates revenue in the state of Texas.
Revenue is generated in various different ways, various different tax revenue. We have fuel taxes, we've got property taxes, we've got our sales taxes. And so those are largely what create the budget, the legislative budget.
With that being said, how do you enhance the revenue?
So I think the important part to look at is, instead of looking how we can get more money, is looking how we can budget correctly and spend the money that we do bring in the best interest of taxpayers.
What do you mean by correctly use your taxpayer money?
So just making sure that all of the taxpayer money that we are using is for the benefit of all taxpayers, that there's no wasteful spending.
What would you consider spending?
Wasteful spending are spending maybe on some programs that possibly don't bring a lot of benefit to the people in the state. So one example I could bring up is the Texas Film Commission, which tends to bring a lot of minimum wage or hourly part-time jobs to an area for a short period of time. So that's something that would be beneficial to the taxpayers of our state to revamp or to eliminate.
Okay, so basically you want to get rid of necessary spending, correct?
Right.
Okay, so basically taxes are the most important revenue, of course, in the state of Texas. How do we ensure that we do not lose too many taxes? And how do we ensure that these taxes truly fund what we need in the state of Texas?
So again, it's hard to talk about whether or not we're losing taxes. I mean, we see through COVID that we have lost a lot of tax revenue, and that's an unprecedented event. So on a typical year, we won't be faced with such a shortfall in our budget. And the more important part is that the money that we do generate, that does come in, that we look at it from what is beneficial for the taxpayers. And so that would be my approach.
Okay, and do you have anything in mind what you would consider beneficial or what you would do if elected to benefit the taxpayer?
Yeah, I think that one of the first steps is auditing the budget, looking at, especially throughout this COVID or after this COVID pandemic, looking at the budget from a zero-sum perspective and looking at what is the most the biggest necessities for people in the state, for the taxpayers, and which ones we might be able to eliminate or to cut, even if it's temporarily. But again, just at the end, we need to make sure that every single dollar that we're spending of taxpayer money is directly benefiting the taxpayers.
What do you basically consider as zero sum?
So zero-sum budgeting is looking at the money that we've brought in, so not necessarily trying to generate more revenue, but looking at what we've already brought in and then allocating that accordingly.
Okay, so how will this auditing work? If elected, what will you propose to audit the taxpayers' money and make sure our revenue is being used at the best benefit?
I think that it needs to be a bipartisan discussion. We need to work with everyone in the House and the Senate, and we need to look at all of the programs, look at the benefits, look at how much spending versus the benefit for the taxpayers, and just, I mean, as tedious as it might sound, just looking at every single part of the budget and make sure that it is benefiting the taxpayers.
What evidence do you have that this would be the best beneficial way to understanding our tax, I guess, how our taxes are spent and how to fix them?
And I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
Were you able to hear me?
I heard the second, but I missed the first part of the question, sorry.
Okay, just to repeat the question, what research do you have that shows that this will be beneficial or this is the best way to audit our taxes?
So my research is actually firsthand experience as a business owner. I've been a small business owner here in El Paso for 6 years now. And at any given point, we're looking at going out, what's coming in, what's the best way that we can decrease spending so that we can increase our pay for our employees. And so when you're looking at it from a business perspective and you look at the state budget and looking at it through that same perspective gives you a good idea that by using that method, by making sure that the money is spent accordingly, that it'll create a more successful and better environment for all the taxpayers.
Thank you for the input on the economy, but one important thing to note is with the economy also comes the issue of healthcare. So we want to shift gears to that of healthcare in Texas. So what will you do to improve healthcare in Texas if it needs to be improved?
Definitely, I think that that's a really important conversation that needs to be had. It's something that is on a lot of people's minds. There are a lot of problems within our healthcare system here in Texas, and we need to remove outside influences on healthcare so that we can reinstate that doctor-patient relationship again.
What do you see as wrong in the healthcare system in that of the state of Texas?
One of the biggest problems we've seen is after the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, a lot of people's deductibles, monthly deductibles skyrocketed. I was speaking with a family just a few days ago, a family of 8 whose healthcare used to be $1,200, and now post Affordable Care Act, it's over $5,000 a month. And there's not many people that can afford that kind of financial burden. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems is the cost of healthcare.
We have 8 minutes left.
Okay, so I know you brought up that of the Affordable Care Act. So uninsured rate in Texas is pretty high, and of course in El Paso County, which is higher than that of the state uninsured rate. What will you do to reduce this uninsured rate in Texas?
That's a great question. There are so many, like you said, so many people that are uninsured throughout the state, throughout this district, and being uninsured leaves people feeling vulnerable, scared, not sure how they'll be able to respond if something happens. And I know firsthand because I actually am uninsured myself. After the Affordable Care Act went into effect, my health insurance more than doubled, and I was assigned to a doctor who happened to be deceased, and I needed emergency back surgery, and my insurance would not cover it. So that is a really scary position to be in. And so we need to create an where these health insurance companies can offer a more competitive market. They can offer better benefits at a cheaper rate, and that families can once again find that coverage that they need to feel secure.
Okay, do you have any evidence besides personal evidence that basically uninsured rates could go down if it becomes more affordable or something like that?
Well, if you insured rate prior to the Affordable Care Act, a lot more people were insured, and so I think that is a testament to how that has affected the residents of this nation and of our state.
In this Texas, many people are under the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, as many like to quote it. So Texas is challenging it in the court along with other states. What will you do so that uninsured rate basically does not continue to rocket, even as we see it already skyrocketing?
Again, we need to create conditions for health insurance companies to offer beneficial plans, and that means being able to cover pre-existing conditions, being able to keep rates low, being able to use that health insurance for various procedures, and so just creating that, deregulating it, and allowing the insurance companies, but more importantly, allowing the doctors and the patients to take back control over an individual's healthcare.
Okay. Do you have anything that the state of Texas can do to replace the Affordable Care Act? Any ideas or anything? Because I know you mentioned what you think is better for the people in the state of Texas. But do you know of anything that could replace it or improve the Affordable Care Act?
So as far as replacing or improving, again, I think it just goes back to offering people choices, giving people the opportunity to bid out different insurance companies and just letting insurance companies build that competition. I think that will bring a huge increase in insured rates throughout the state.
So one thing to know is what are you willing to do to protect the unborn child and the mother's right to choose that of the healthcare insurance or healthcare in general?
So I am a big defender of life. I believe in the sanctity of life. But with that being said, it is so important to not only talk about the sanctity of life, but talk about how we can help a mother who does choose life for their baby. So whether it be by supporting that mother and family after she chooses life, or whether it be by reforming our adoption and foster care systems. The conversation cannot end just at life and at the unborn. We have to talk about what happened after.
What would you do to reform that of the foster care and adoption system to protect the unborn child?
A big thing is that adopting a baby is so expensive. The financial burden that it puts on families can be tens of thousands of dollars. And there's so many families out there who want to welcome a baby into their home, who want to love them and care for them and provide for them. But that initial expense is just astronomical. And so that's something that we really need to reform, we cut back on, because if we are going to encourage mothers to choose life, we have to make sure that those other options are available and that there are families who are able to welcome that baby into their family.
Continuing with that of children and how we treat the children in the state of Texas, it comes to our next topic, which is education. So, education as of right now, in your opinion, do you think we can improve it, or what do you think we can do if it needs to be improved?
Well, I definitely think that there is major room for improvement in our education system. And one of the ways that we can work on that is by bringing control of our education system in Texas back to Texas. So removing the federal government out of that process.
Okay, and we have 2.5 minutes left.
How would you propose to better our education, since it needs betterment and you think the state should take control of it?
So step one would be pushing our federal government out of the public school system here. And then step two is we already put a lot of money into our public education system, but that money is being misappropriated. That money is meant to create a successful environment for our students and our teachers, and very often, more often than not, it's not reaching its intended target. So we need to audit the finances and make sure that that money that we have earmarked for students and for teachers for our future generations, that it is being used appropriately.
What do you mean by misappropriation with our education funding?
So instances where that funding might get stuck up at a higher level, maybe for bonuses, for pay increases, for a higher level employee versus to the teachers or for students for supplies. That's, it needs to trickle all the way down. All of it needs to go to its intended purpose.
Why do you believe we need change? Why do you think this improvement needs to come now, especially?
It needs to come now because we are failing our future generations. If we want to fight for everything that we want to talk about, all the good things that we want to do, it means nothing if we don't protect our children, if we do not reform the education system, and if we do not create a successful environment for them to be able to grow and learn and become educated and become productive members of society.
Going on to our last question, which comes to that of appropriation with money. What are your thoughts on House Bill 3, and what do you think could be done other than House Bill 3 in our education system?
So I think that there needs to be I'm thinking of Senate Bill 10. We need to make sure that any legislation that comes through the legislature is fully 100% for the benefit of our teachers and of our students. So too often we see legislation that is just fluff, or that it doesn't really do much other than add more spending, but it doesn't address the core issues of the problem. And so I think that any bill that comes through that I would vote on, that I would sponsor, co-sponsor, it needs to have the best interest of those that we want to create a better environment for, and that's our students and our teachers.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I want to thank you, Ms. Hatch, for giving us your input on the 3 topics that we covered today. I'll be sending you on to a breakout room, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome, Representative Cesar Blanco. Born and raised in El Paso, Cesar Blanco comes from a family of nurses, teachers, and a tradition of U.S. military service dating back to World War I. Upon graduating from Eastwood High School, Cesar carried on the family tradition of public service by joining the Navy. He went on to earn his degree from the University of Texas at El Paso with the help from G. Bill. After college, Cesar worked for 3 congressmen, represented El Paso and West Texas. He started out as a caseworker and worked his way up to chief of staff. In 2014, Cesar ran for and was elected to the Texas House of Representatives. Representative Blanco is completing his 3rd term in the Texas House. Rep. Blanco has led initiatives to strengthen El Paso's workforce and local economy, protection of education benefits, and expand mental health resources for Texas veterans, and historic investment in public schools. For his record of defending veterans' education benefits and standing up for the border, Texas Monthly Magazine named Representative Blanco one of the best legislators in Texas. Representative Blanco is running for the Texas Senate because El Paso and West Texas needs a leader who will put people over politics and deliver results. That means fighting for our fair share to improve education, make healthcare more affordable and accessible, build the infrastructure our region needs to grow, and create greater economic opportunity for all.
Okay. So good evening, Mr. Or Representative Blanco. My apologies. My name is Dina Antoine, and today I'm going to be moderating your portion of the debate. So we really thank you for participating in this event. For the debate today, for the next 15 minutes, we will be having a discussion to better understand the policies that you have as a candidate for the Texas Senate. Please be very clear and specific so that the constituents can get a better understanding of you and your stance on different topics that we're going to discuss today. So to get straight into it, first off, I wanted to go ahead and start with the economy and discussing different aspects of the economy. So the first question I have for you is, what creates revenue for?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all and the students. Part of the organization, We Fill in the Blank. It's inspiring that you all are doing this, and we're in good hands. Our country's in good hands because of you all are doing these great events for policy purposes and educational purposes. You know, the state receives a great deal of revenue from a variety of things: sales tax, oil and gas revenue, and a variety of other things. But those are the 2 main sources of revenue for the state. And we have recently are going to go through a budget shortfall. Glenn Hager, the state comptroller, recently put out a revenue estimate that will create a $4.5 billion shortfall in this legislative budget. That's because the revenues are down, one, as a result of the Saudi and Russia price war on oil and gas. That's the first reason. The second reason is this pandemic has really hurt our ability to obtain more sales tax that comes into the state. That's because restaurants are not at full capacity. People aren't going to the stores as much, and the state is not receiving the type of revenue that it's used to. Back in before the pandemic, the comptroller put out an estimate that we would have had a $2.9 billion surplus. So unfortunately, because of COVID, because of reduced revenue to the state, we're going to have to make some really tough decisions.
Sorry to cut you off, but I just kind of wanted to go back to when you were discussing the shortfall that we are going to have in our revenue as a result of everything that's going on currently. And I just kind of wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that concept. So you gave evidence of international affairs that we're having and how that's contributing to our shortfall, but what specifically is happening within the state of Texas that contributes to the shortfall?
So,
what evidence do you have of statewide efforts or things that are occurring within the state of Texas that would be under your control that are impacting the shortfall? And what will you do to fix this issue?
So the two main drivers of the budget shortfall is the pandemic because of reduced purchases. Folks aren't buying as much things and going out shopping as much. So that reduces the source of income from the state derived from the sales tax, number one. And number two, oil and gas prices are affecting the revenue that we receive from the oil and gas tax, meaning people are less on the road. People aren't driving to work anymore because people are spending time in a virtual space, so they're not buying gasoline, and that really impacts our state revenue. What are we going to do, and how can we as state representatives make adjustments? We're going to have to find more sources of revenue, and I'll tell you where we can. The comptroller recently said that there's $60 billion a year, $60 billion a year in tax loopholes, carve-outs. These are folks who own yachts. These are folks who own private planes that don't have to pay taxes on these things. These are all loopholes, and $60 billion a year could fund a whole lot of things. We also have an $8.8 billion rainy day fund, which is designed for things and situations that are occurring right now, such as this pandemic or natural disasters. So these are the type of things that we need to utilize. And it's also a reprioritization of the budget. We spend $800 million a year, a biennium rather, on border security when it's a federal responsibility. So we need to reprioritize. We need to look at where we can use these sources of revenue, meaning the rainy day fund, misplaced priorities in the budget, such as border security, and as well as cutting the outs and the tax loopholes that folks who have yachts and private planes are using.
Okay. Kind of going back to when you brought up the rainy day fund and the different tax loopholes within the taxes, can you go ahead and clarify what the rainy day fund is and specifically how these tax loopholes and how these influences within the tax system in Texas are essentially affecting the revenue that the state is receiving?
Sure. So the rainy day fund is a fund created for emergency purposes. It could be used for a one-time use. We've used the rainy day fund for a variety of things, such as disaster, hurricanes, things like that. We have $8.8 billion in that fund that can be tapped into COVID relief. And I think that the Democratic caucus has already been talking about utilizing those funds for that kind of disaster mitigation for a variety of things. It could be used for housing, help to mitigate people getting kicked out of their apartments or their rental properties. It could be used for programs to help small businesses with their labor, to pay for folks and their insurance. It can be used for a variety of things, such as stockpiling PPE and helping schools mitigate any kind of costs that they're incurring because of spending for the pandemic. So
how would implementing this rainy day fund, if you are suggesting this, how would that, or what evidence do you have that implementing that, in addition to rearranging the taxes or imposing new tax legislation, as you were saying before when you were discussing the taxes, how do you believe that will help to better the current status of the economy in Texas?
Well, that's what the account is for. When you have a savings account for emergency purposes, we got to use it. And many times Republicans have been reluctant to utilize it, but that's what it's there for. We're lucky. Not a lot of states have a rainy day fund as robust as ours. So we need to utilize that. In terms of taxes, these loopholes, folks have been getting away with these sorts of things for quite some time. I mean, we saw evidence with Donald Trump recently with his tax returns. The New York Times reported it. And folks are getting away with this sort of thing. You know, it's our responsibility to pay taxes. And, for too long.
Right, kind of shifting from the subject of the economy, I'm going to discuss a little bit about healthcare and how healthcare is implemented within the United States or in Texas and how it's controlled by the legislation. So if you're elected, what would you do to improve healthcare within Texas if there's anything that needs to be improved?
So the thing that Texas can do to improve access to care, to improve payment for physicians for the service that they're providing, to cover the uncompensated care. For example, the UMC here in El Paso has millions of dollars in uncompensated care. The way we can fix that is through expanding Medicaid. Many states have expanded Medicaid over under Obamacare. Republican governors throughout the country have expanded Medicaid in their states. And I'm sorry, I said Medicare, but it's Medicaid. So that's so important. If we expanded Medicaid in the state of Texas, we would receive $10 billion per year in compensated care. Folks who would have insurance. 1.1 million.
We were discussing the implications of Medicare and Medicaid. So I kind of just wanted to see what evidence you have that would kind of support your stance in saying that this would be the most successful route for the state of Texas.
The evidence is that 22 other states have already expanded Medicaid, and their healthcare outcomes have improved. When you have 1.1 million uninsured Texans in the state of Texas that can't afford health insurance, even though they're working and even though they have jobs, they still can't afford it. Expanding Medicaid can provide that coverage. Texas pays millions and millions of dollars in taxes into the federal system that other states benefit from. 32 million exactly, billion rather. So it's amazing how much money is leaving the state when we could expand some of that and come back with $10 billion a year to pay our doctors to give patients more access to quality care.
Okay, so what do you propose as an alternative, or what do you propose to reduce the uninsured rate with Texas and to kind of regulate this so that the citizens of the state have better access to resources that are necessary?
So I think number one, the big thing is Medicaid expansion. That's the number one thing that we can do. Hospitals support it, physicians support it, nurses support it, patients support it. Across the board, it's support. It's down politics is what it is. And unfortunately, Republicans are reluctant to expand Medicaid. So in terms of providing better access to care, Medicaid is number one. Number two, COVID has really demonstrated the shortcomings of our public health system, number one. And number two, has demonstrated how limited access folks have. And telehealth has really changed that. The governor, thankfully, requested that the insurance companies suspend the rule that you have to be in person to receive care and for the physician to be compensated for that care. But telehealth has changed that. So now if you're in Alpine, Texas or Presidio, Texas, you can see your physician in El Paso through telemedicine. And your physician is going to be paid for it. We need to continue that sort of access to care beyond COVID, beyond the pandemic, because I think people are going to have better healthcare outcomes. It's access, and it's how many people we get to train every year to become doctors, physicians, which is why we have a medical campus here in El Paso, which is why we have a pharmacy school at UTEP, because we want to train these healthcare providers, especially from El Paso in this region, so they can stay here, do their residencies here, and end up providing quality care for our community here in El Paso.
4 minutes left.
So you stated that having different resources available to us, such as the School of Medicine and the different pharmaceutical schools for example, you said the one at UTEP. So I'm going to kind of shift into education and the way that Texas legislation addresses education within the state. So the first question I have for you is, what will you do to improve the education system within the state of Texas in both secondary education and graduate education?
Great question. Last session, this legislature made historic funding improvements through House Bill 3. This was an $11 million proposal that passed. And it was so important because it did a variety of things. It infused more dollars for dynamic pay raises for our teachers. It bought down property taxes for our communities who are paying enormous amount of taxes because, frankly, the state has refused to pay its fair share in taxes. And it also gave money directly to the schools for educational programs. Specifically, let me give you some numbers. There was $5 million utilized to pay down any kind of property taxes for our communities. And then there was a total of $2 billion utilized for teacher pay raises. And not just teachers, it's also librarians, counselors, and school nurses as well. And then the rest of the money was utilized for in-class improvements, technology, and education services. This has been the greatest investment
So, kind of going back to, you're talking about the allocation of these funds, how House Bill 3 contributed to a higher quantity of money being distributed to schools. What evidence do you have that supports House Bill 3 and supports the amount of money that was given to the schools? Has there been any evidence within education? Has there been any improvement within student performance?
So, great question. The $11 billion that was allocated from the state legislature to our communities. And let me give you an example. El Paso Independent School District received each student, and all you students have $832 that the state provided for your education in El Paso Independent School District. That all total is $42 million for EPISD. And the same was across the board for many school districts. Obviously, the levels were different, but the allocation was extremely was high. Now, I think we should do more. The state doesn't spend enough money on our public education. It's a constitutional responsibility of the state legislature to fund our public school system, and we've been short of that for many years. But this last legislative session, again, we put $11 billion into it. We're receiving more money here in our school districts. Our teachers are getting paid. They received a paycheck. And we've also helped the retired teachers. We gave them a 13th paycheck in the amount, on average, $2,000 for that year because they needed it. It also shored up the teachers' retirement system as well. So this is real money that has been invested into our school systems, and it's going to go a long way. I think we can do better. I think we will do more. And if Democrats pick up the House, I think you're going to see greater investments in education.
Unfortunately, that question does conclude our period of discussion here. So I just wanted to thank you again, Representative Blanco, for your time and your contribution to this discussion.
Thank you, Dina. Appreciate it.
So we will now be taking questions from the audience through our live streams and scholars involved in Refill in the Blank. So we ask anybody watching this live to submit your questions via the chat on either YouTube or Twitter, whichever platform you are streaming on, and we will get to as much as we can in the following, or in the few minutes that we have left of this debate.
So just to move on to how this town hall portion of the debate will work, for each question, the first candidate to go will have 2 minutes to respond, and the opposing candidate will have 1 minute for a rebuttal. They will then switch roles for the next question, etc. We ask our candidates to please refrain from attacking the other candidate and focus more on sharing your ideas. For our attendees, if you would like to ask a question, and you are in the Zoom session right now, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the participants tab, and you will be unmuted shortly. Let's see. Do we have anybody that would like to ask a question yet? Okay. Our first question will be from Eleanor Dearman from the El Paso Times. Representative Blanco, you will have 2 minutes to respond first, and then Mrs. Hatch, you will have a 1 minute rebuttal.
Hi, and thanks y'all for hosting this and giving me the opportunity to ask a question. I really appreciate it. So I guess my question, so if elected to Senate, what measures would you support to prevent mass shootings like the one we saw in El Paso just over a year ago?
Great question, Ellie. Thank you for that. So after the shooting, the governor appointed me to the Texas Safety Commission, and the Speaker of the House appointed me to the Select Committee on Mass Violence Prevention. And we have done hearings throughout the state where mass shootings have occurred. I think there are some important measures that we need to take. Number one, I think we need to make some positive gun reform safety bills, such as eliminating bump stock bans. We need to ensure that we have universal background checks. We need to make sure that individuals who are convicted of violent crimes and domestic abusers don't have access to firearms, are unable to purchase firearms. We need to make sure that we're holding social media accountable for the type of hate that they're allowing to occur within their social media feeds. And we also need to make sure that we're holding these hate groups accountable for what they're saying. What occurred here in El Paso was the intersection between gun violence and racism. And we need to make sure that the state is doing everything it can to go after these horrible individuals that are creating this type of hatred with the use of handguns. So there's a balance of a variety of things that we need to do. We also need to eliminate straw purchases. This is something that both Lieutenant Governor Patrick and the governor discussed during these roundtables. So those are a few measures that I think that we can do, and hopefully we're able to accomplish that this next legislative session.
Okay, Miss Bethany Hatch, you now have 1 minute for, okay. I think she's having some technical issues right now. We will pause just for a few short minutes so that we can get a proper response. Okay, so I believe Ms. Hatch is getting on the Zoom again, trying to reconnect. So we will just continue waiting. Again, back to our previous statement about having a virtual debate, we are asking that everyone has a little bit of patience. Thank you so much. Okay, Mrs. Hatch, can you hear us now?
Yes, I am so sorry about that. I lost internet connection. I'm on the phone now.
That's
Not
okay. I guess, I'm not sure if you heard the question.
I didn't hear anything.
Let me repeat it for you, absolutely, and let me know if you hear me.
Thank you. I'm so sorry, Eleanor.
Oh no, you're totally fine. It's technology, you know.
Love and hate it, right?
Exactly. So I'm going to repeat the question. If elected to the Senate, what measures would you support to prevent mass shootings like the one we saw in El Paso just over a year ago?
Absolutely. That's a great question, especially for, like you said, a year ago, we had that terrible shooting here. And something that comes to my mind is during the House hearing here in January, there was a man who was actually at that Walmart, and he was there with his mother and his girlfriend. And he talked about being in that situation and coming face to face with the gunman, and he said he ran outside looking for a good guy with a gun. And so I think that it's important to encourage responsible carrying of firearms, encourage education and safety, but also make it to where if a cowardly person ever comes in and wants to terrorize our city or any city throughout the nation, that they're the ones left wondering whether or not somebody's going to defend them against their cowardly act.
All right, so I believe for the sake of this question, just because we had a bit of a technical issue there, we will skip the responses. Do any of the participants in this Zoom call, any of the scholars, by any chance have any questions? Okay, our next question will be from Andrea Belis.
Yeah, so as a student within the system of the education system being online as of currently, how would each of you as a senator, if elected, be that agent of change, like imposing protocols or restrictions to make that transition into in-person school easier for everybody, while still reducing the risk of COVID-19 like we have seen in many of the other states in the United States?
So Representative Blanco, you now have 2 minutes to respond to the question.
I was under the impression that we were going to switch, so Bethany would have 2 minutes, and then I would have 1 minute.
Okay. Yes, sorry. I apologize. Sorry. Yes. So Miss Bethany Hatch, you now have the floor.
That's okay. So that's a great question. Right now, we've got a lot of people who are, a lot of kids who haven't been in school for months, a lot of teachers who haven't been able to teach in person, that they've been making adjustments on both sides. And it's really important to recognize that this has put such a difficulty on our students and our teachers. And number one is we need to create a dialogue with our teachers, with the parents, and then work on a plan that can accommodate everybody. So there are some people who want to stay virtual, and that's fine. There are some teachers who want to stay virtual, but we need to, the district should send out a survey and see which students and which teachers want to be virtual versus in person, and then make matches that way. And then again, as they're coming back to school, making sure that we do follow proper good safety protocol, cleanliness, to make it the safest environment, but also getting kids and students back out there, because we've seen a huge increase in depression and anxiety and a lot of negative impact on our society. So I think it's important to get back and to do it safely, and to do it with the input of teachers, students, and their parents.
Representative Blanco, you now have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. Very important question. There's a lot of unknowns. EPISD just extended the timeline for students to come back to school. Number one, I think the state has to do its part in providing schools the ability to keep their students, teachers, and staff safe. That means getting the proper PPE, making sure that there's hand sanitizer, making sure that they have all of the things that they need to sanitize a school, making sure that the protocols are in place to keep a safe environment for our children. But I also think that the state needs to make investments in technology, right? I think that we could provide hotspots, we could provide tablets, we could provide a variety of things for teachers and students that they can take home to ensure that you all are getting a quality education. Now, I understand that interaction is important. I remember that face-to-face interaction with my teachers are so important. But what we don't want to do is allow kids to be exposed to the virus. 60% of teachers at EPISD have underlying conditions. My sister's a teacher at in EPISD, and she's scared of what could happen. Now, a lot of kids in El Paso, they have 3 generations in their homes. They live with abuelito and abuelita, right? Who may have underlying conditions. And we don't want kids to get COVID in school and then bring it back home to their families. We got to let science lead the way. We got to let the public health professionals lead the way, not politics, not pundits, not folks who are trying to make political points. We got to be guided by scientists. So we need to listen more to Dr. Fauci rather than politicians to make these informed decisions. But the state needs to do its fair share to making sure that the resources are there to stay safe and that they have the technology to make sure that they continue to get a good education.
Okay. So our next few questions, just to get back on the right track, we'll be receiving, just to clarify, 2-minute response from our first candidate, and then the other candidate will get a 1-minute response to that candidate. And then that candidate will then get 2 minutes to answer the question, and the other candidate will get a response to that candidate. Does anyone need any clarification? No? Okay. Do any of our student scholars have any questions? Okay, our next question will be from Danae Villalba.
Okay, so you both want to improve education, and especially being a border town city, we have a lot of students that speak Spanish. So I know there's teachers out there that need to speak bilingual and teach in bilingual, but not all of them have a bilingual stipend. So what would you do about that, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's my turn to go. Great question. Look, El Paso is a community where 34% of the kids are English language learners. And it's important that we have qualified teachers to be able to provide the type of quality education to get these kids on track, to making sure that they're learning English, making sure that they're understanding their school homework and in-class instruction. I think we need to provide better training, and I think the state should pay for it. I don't think that our parents and local taxpayers should cover the cost of this. It should be the state that's making these investments to making sure that we're providing good programs for education for our teachers, making sure that they're receiving the certifications, making sure that we're providing resources so that teachers receive graduate level certifications and degree programs to provide students with English language learning abilities. So the state has not done a good job. This last session through House Bill 3, we made more investments, but we could do a better job of helping our teachers receive the training that they need and they deserve and that they want to help our English language learner students get on the right track. It's important because it's great to have 2 languages. Speaking Spanish and English or another language makes you far more competitive in the workforce. But we want to make sure that you're able to compete and making sure that you're going to be able to pass your exams to compete in college and beyond. So I think the state can make greater investments in those areas. We have in the past, but we can always do better.
Ms. Hatch, you now have 1 minute to respond.
I think that growing up in a border town, it's so important to be able to communicate. I learned Spanish at a young age, and it has greatly benefited me throughout my life. And it's really important to make sure that every student that comes through the public school system is equipped for a better future. And I think that it's the wrong idea is to throw money at it to increase our expenditure when we can actually just work on reforming the how they learn and when they learn. When children are younger, they tend to pick up languages easier. So if we focus more on the younger ages, create some sort of English transition class program. So be it that they learn that would be a conversation that would be had with teachers, with educators to create a program so that these younger students can learn. What?
I'm sorry, that's time.
No, that's okay.
So, Ms. Hatch, you now have 2 minutes to respond to the question.
Okay, well, I'll just continue on what I was saying, and it will come down to the educators and teachers to create a program where we can start kids at a younger age, make sure that they're learning, that they're well versed in English before they get up into middle school, into high school. Because again, what happens is that we see a lot of students going all the way through high school and not being proficient in English, and English is the standard. Globally, it's the standard language for business. So we need to make sure that these children, when they're leaving our education system, that they are well prepared, that they're well prepared to go out into the workforce to take on any job. And so if we can start them at a young age versus training teachers at every single level, and that's not to say that we shouldn't have some teachers trained at a higher level, but we really need to focus on bringing it to the younger age groups and making sure that as they work their way through the public school system, as they grow, that we're preparing them at every level before they graduate.
Time. Okay, so we will now move on to our next question. Does anybody else in the Zoom meeting have any questions? Okay. I think our next question will be from Victor Mesa.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us. So my question, it also has to do with education, but more specifically charter schools, and basically your stance on whether public funds should be going to charter schools, but most importantly, why you hold that stance.
Is it my turn first this time?
Yes.
Okay, that's a great question. And I think that something that we're seeing right now is a lot of parents actually making that decision to leave the public school system for charter schools. And I believe that we should allow parents to have the sovereignty over their children's education. That's their tax dollars that they're putting into the system, and we should allow them to make that choice. A child is the parent ultimately should have the decision-making capabilities, and by not allowing that money to go to a charter school that the parent might choose to send their child to, then you're putting extra financial burden on the family if they end up pay out of pocket but in the end, we just need to make sure that those taxpayer dollars that the parents have already spent are being used wisely, and that they have complete sovereignty over the choices for their children.
All right, Representative Blanco, you now have 1 minute to respond.
Sure, thank you. Look, we know that charter schools are funded by the state, and we know that they're growing. We're seeing a lot of charter schools here in El Paso. One of the things that I'm opposed to are vouchers. I don't think that we should be utilizing vouchers to subsidize education in private schools. That's something that I do not support. These are taxpayer dollars utilized for private schools, and I think that public money shouldn't be utilized for that. Regarding charter schools, we've got many here in El Paso. We want to make sure that they are following the same guidelines and standards and accountability standards as your traditional public schools. So we want to make sure that there's parity there, and that if they're not doing well, and that they have the same amount of special ed kids in those schools as well, and providing services for them as well. So we want to make sure that there's the same accountabilities, the same requirements, and that are at other schools are in public schools as well.
Okay, we're approaching our 20-minute mark, so we will ask one final question. So our final question is, do you feel there is a need to hold law enforcement accountable for their actions? And if so, how do you plan to hold them accountable? So for this question, Representative Blanco, you have 2 minutes to begin.
Absolutely. Look, there's got to be accountability in every system. We are seeing a lot of scenarios where there is police violence. It does exist. And we must acknowledge that Black lives matter. They matter. And we want to make sure that we have to understand that there is systemic racism in all of our institutions in this country. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. It's okay that we do that. As it relates to the police, I'm going to support the George Floyd Act. The Texas Black legislative rolled out a legislative proposal to make police departments. Now, look, support police. I've got family members that acted in the police force, and I hear their stories. But there's accountability. We got to ban chokeholds. We got to make there's independent review of any kind of allegations of police violence. We need to make sure that police officers provide first aid in situations where people may be dying, such as George Floyd in that situation. We need to allow and encourage police officers when they're finding a partner is committing violence on somebody, that they have a duty to stop that. So we need to make sure that there's accountability, just like there's accountability in everything. If there's a police shooting, it should go to a review board. It should be examined outside the police department for a honest assessment and investigation. So these are the things that I think that we need to do. You can do both. You can back the badge, but also understand that there needs to be reforms. When we live in a system with inherent racism, that needs to be acknowledged. And we need to make those changes and reforms.
Ms. Hatch, you now have 1 minute to respond.
I definitely agree that we need law enforcement to, when we have a police officer, they need to be held accountable. I've actually had conversations. I've been around the dinner table with law enforcement officers, with our police. That we're blessed here in El Paso. We have an amazing police department, and to hear these cries for defunding here in our city, it's breaking their hearts, and it breaks the hearts of the community, because we are really blessed. I'm really sorry if y'all can hear. Apparently, there's a party like next door now. I'm sorry if you can hear the music. And I've had these conversations with our law enforcement, and they want this accountability too, because having a bad police officer as a partner makes their job 10 times harder. So we need to do what we can to support them. We need to work with them and not against them, and make sure that we are creating a good environment for all of our law enforcement.
All right, so with that, we will now move on to the candidates' closing statements. So the candidates will both have 1 minute for each of their closing statements, and we will begin with Ms. Hatch.
I just wanted to, first of all, thank y'all so much for putting this debate on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with y'all and to hear your questions, because that's in the end what is going to make a better representative, is somebody who can take the questions and the voice of the people into the office and represent the true will of the people. And with that being said, I want to end with El Paso has been buying the Democrat product for decades. We have always been represented by career politicians, and this is where it's gotten us. We have the highest property taxes in the nation, and we have the lowest median income in the state. If it wasn't for the border and for Fort Bliss, then El Paso wouldn't have an economy, and that's not El Paso strong. And I say this as someone who loves my community, who employs over 20 El Pasoans, and who wants better for every resident of our district. A lot of people complain about El Paso being forgotten by the rest of Texas. And maybe, is that 2 minutes?
Oh, that was 1 minute for the closing statement.
Oh, the closing was 1?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Ms. Hatch, we will now move on to a 1 minute closing statement from Representative Blanco.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the students for allowing this forum to take place today. I want to thank Bethany for taking a run at this. It's important. You know, she's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. But there's no doubt that Bethany and I both love El Paso in our community. She has a way of approaching it. I have a way of approaching it, but there's commonality, and we both deeply care about this community. So I want to thank you, Bethany, for putting your name out there, having this debate, and talk about how we move our community forward. Win or lose, I want to work with you to do that. Look, I've spent a lifetime of service, about 20 years of public service. I come from a long line of military service and public service. My sister's a school teacher. Both my parents are nurses. For me, it's about helping our community. But it's not just what we do at the Capitol in policy. It's about what we do here for our community. And I'm proud to have done multiple back-to-school backpack fairs, providing turkey drives for families that need meals, making sure that we're providing free tax preparation events for our community. So it's not only policy,
that's time,
but it's for our community. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes We Fill in the Blank Texas 29 State Senate debate. This debate would not have been possible without the help and the commitment from all of you watching at home. We would like to thank the candidates and their teams, the tech crew, and every member that was involved in this event for help making it possible. With the unprecedented times we are living in and the outbreak of COVID-19, it may seem as though we are limited by our greatest fears to move forward into our better tomorrows. Yet what we will take from this is far greater than anything we have ever faced. In the middle of difficulty will always lie opportunity. And it is people like you who allow for We Fill in the Blank to contribute to the border community. We would like to remind you that early voting begins October 13th and the election takes place on Tuesday, November the 3rd. For more information on when and where to vote, please visit epcountyvotes.com. Once again, that is epcountyvotes.com. We encourage each of you to cast your ballot because your vote is your voice. Be sure to follow us on Twitter using the handle @WeFitB. Thank you all for tuning in and have a good night.